This is actually a story that resonates, and when people that are struggling and trying to make it, I always tell them this story, and it was about the script Dragonfly. So we wrote this script. Well, it's funny. I mean, it's just a journey of discovery as a screenwriter, right? Like, I remember the first script that I ever sold was for like $125,000, and it was because my boss, who I was an assistant at the time, I gave him the script because I wanted his help at maybe getting an agent. And to my shock, he walked in the next morning and said, "I like your script. I think I'm gonna buy it." And he made one phone call to Joe Roth, that was the head of Disney at the time. I placed the call for him, and sure enough, they had a conversation that I wasn't privy to, and the next thing I know, Disney bought the script. And what I later concluded was, I was kind of a long in the tooth for an assistant at that point. I was 25, and I think my boss kind of wanted to move me out, and that this was actually just an excuse that he gave to be able to do that, and called in a favor with an old buddy. And to this day, I think that's actually what that was. But it didn't matter because we were on our way, right? Once you get behind the secret knock to the door, you're in, and you have that confidence. Okay, this can be done, right? And now let's try and do it again. And so we had a couple more bites at the apple at that level. We sold this silly comedy to Paramount, and we were still fumbling in the dark, trying to find our voice, trying to figure out, who are we? What are we trying to say? What do we want to make movies about? We were at that point, I think, kind of just attempting to sell scripts and attempting to get a foot in the door and be viable in some way in this movie business that we had both watched as spectators while working for big producers and seeing how it worked. We still hadn't quite become writers with a voice, if you will. And so when we got to the point of selling Steinbeck's Point of View, I'd say we were just at that point, we had sold Dragonfly, and it was sort of moving through the chain of development, finding a director, finding a star to get made, all of that. So by the time we sold Dragonfly, I think we were just, Steinbeck's, we were just delighted to have actually pulled off the heist of saying that we were producer and director and getting away with it. That we'd actually had a proof of concept, if you will, that is a workable approach to rising in the ranks, is to use and exploit your own material and the success of it to propel yourself upward, up the ladder and up the ranks. So, and then of course, when Tom Cruise came around, that was amazing. But as it started to sort of fall apart and not come to fruition, we were already sort of on to other things. And at that point, we were just sort of looking at it with amazement that something could be so close and so big and yet still not come to fruition. And that's a lesson that I take with me to this day. I have projects with some of the biggest producers in Hollywood right now, and it's great. It's wonderful. If anyone's going to get it done, they are. But having learned these lessons along the way, I don't take anything for granted, and I don't assume that things are going to happen just because you have really powerful people involved, because it's a very difficult business to succeed in. And so that was just a learning lesson along the way, and it was obviously a very thrilling time to be working with a big movie star one-on-one like that, and to be embraced by a studio, and to sort of begin and plant a flag, if you will, of who we were and what we were about, so that from that point forward, people that were maybe looking to hire us or throw assignment work our way, we started to sort of develop a voice and a sort of, we were kind of, at one point we were known as the supernatural guys. We would get every supernatural script you could imagine. And I didn't mind it because I love supernatural, and I love the questions of the beyond, and finding a way to conceptually dramatize those in a way that's cinematic and fun and exciting. So
So you weren't necessarily that green where you hadn't seen the ups and downs of Hollywood and you hadn't moved yet. You were still living in Los Angeles?
Yes, I was still in LA. I didn't move back home until at least 12 years into my journey, if you will, to try and make it. And but at that point, I was able to move home because I didn't need to be in LA anymore. I could fly in for meetings. I could video conference with my partner. You know, we used to sit at a coffee shop every day and do our work, and then it just changed and was over a TV screen. And but the same work was being accomplished, and I was able to fly down for meetings. But no, for me, that early going, when I first, at I think 25 years old, sold that script that my boss set up at Disney, that was that moment, and it was really profound. And I tell people, this is actually a story that resonates, and when people that are struggling and trying to make it, I always tell them this story, and it was about the script Dragonfly. So we wrote this script. It was the first one that felt like, okay, this is pretty good. We might actually have a voice. We might actually know what we're doing. And so, but we didn't have an agent at the time. And we were really sort of green and had no connections. So we needed to find an agent. So what we did was we researched Variety, we researched Hollywood Reporter. Every day there's a spec sale, you know, somebody's selling something, and there's an agent's name mentioned, and so we write all that down and keep lists and start noticing who the agents were that were selling a lot of spec scripts, the ones that were selling ones that were like what we had written. And by the time we were done, we had about 30 names. And so we just started cold calling and saying, you know, you don't know us, but we've got this great script. And I would say probably, 30% never returned the call. Of those that we actually spoke to, probably half said, I don't take unsolicited material, no thank you. So that left, maybe 15 that accepted the script. And then out of those 15, probably half never ever bothered to call back. And of the half that did, they all passed. So what is that? That's 29 passes. But then we got one call from this guy at a boutique agency who said, I love it. Come in. Let's sit down and talk about it. So we went in and met with this guy, agent. He had one or two tiny little notes, but otherwise he got it. He loved it. He says, let's try and sell this thing. So the following Tuesday, because that's how it was done in the 90s when there was the spec boom, he went out to 25 producers that all had deals at studios, and immediately a lot of producers loved the script, and they all took it into their corresponding studios to see if they could get them to buy it for them. And so over the course of the next 48, 72 hours, one studio after another, they're all passing. And you just get these calls all day long, these heartbreaking, Paramount passed, Warner Bros. Passed, Universal passed, and you start to see it gaining momentum, and you start thinking, oh, this is not going to sell. And then you go through the whole trauma of, so it was all for nothing. We spent all these months writing this for nothing, and it used to happen so fast in those days. Literally within 48, 72 hours, you would go out with it and know if you sold it or didn't. And because executives would read it at their desk at lunch, that's how things used to work. But then all of a sudden, out of the blue, we get the call that United Artists wants to buy it. And they bought it for, I think, $400,000 against $750,000. And just like that, the movie was set up, and it later became a produced movie with Kevin Costner. But I always tell that story because it literally, those 29 agents that either never called back or passed or what have you, they all missed the commission on that. They were all wrong, or they were wrong to not bother. All those studios that passed on it and said this is not a movie, there's no movie star that would ever do this, they were all wrong, and they all got it wrong. And it just takes one, it only ever takes one. And that was like one of the most formative lessons that I ever took as a screenwriter in terms of learning the nature of the business and learning how much rejection you have to be able to withstand, as long as you can put it in context and understand that it doesn't mean anything. I have no respect for rejection anymore. I just dismiss it. If I believe in an idea and I believe in it passionately and firmly and fervently believe, no, this is really exciting and interesting and people are going to be compelled by this, then I don't care what agents tell me, I don't care what studio executives, I don't care. Just keep going, because all it takes is one. And then once you have that one, the very next day, all the people that passed, they all say, of course, we wanted to bid on that, of course, yes. They all change their tune. They all want you to come in for meetings because they all think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. So that, to me, was sort of one of the most definitive moments in my journey in terms of girding me for the journey ahead, because it has become more and more challenging with new business models and new dynamics, and you really have to sort of get your mind around the idea that it's going to take volume, it's going to take relentlessness, and it's going to take an immunity to rejection.